Firstly today, I want to talk about Franklin Graham. Franklin Graham is the son of the famous evangelist Billy Graham. He toured Australia just last year, 2019. He preached to thousands of people in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide and Darwin. And his style is that of a simple, old-fashioned gospel message. He says, repent from your sin, put your faith in Jesus Christ, be born again. It really is that simple. Now, his father, who went before him, preached to a crowd of nearly 140,000 people in the Melbourne Cricket Ground, which is the largest crowd ever attracted to that venue to this day. Some turn up their nose at simple Billy Graham-style evangelism, but look, they are wrong to do so because the legacy of his work is undeniable. You don't have to go very far in Christian circles these days to find someone who was converted in a Billy Graham crusade. In fact, there's many key Christian leaders right now around Australia and in the last few decades who were converted in a Billy Graham crusade. The fruit of his work, preaching to 200 million people plus around the globe during his lifetime, is unbelievable, and it's eternal fruit. It's an eternal legacy. I've recently been watching some of his sermons on YouTube, and I tell you what, he was gifted for the role. There is nobody else that I've come across who can make 100,000 people from every conceivable walk of life freeze in their seat just by the power of his speech. He was a preacher of the gospel. Now, Billy Graham's efforts included the United Kingdom, and I raise that because that brings us back to Franklin Graham and the present story. Franklin Graham was to go back to the UK this year and to preach there in several venues, but it's different this time. This time, Franklin Graham has been banned. First, it was Liverpool. The mayor of Liverpool banned Franklin Graham from the council-owned stadium. Then it was Sheffield, also the result of pressure from the Sheffield City Council. Then it was Glasgow, followed quickly thereafter, also a result of pressure from the Glasgow City Council. Then Birmingham, then Cardiff, then Milton Keynes, and the only venues remaining now are Newcastle and London at the time of recording, and both of those are considered to be under threat. Let's dig into the excuses employed by these various authorities. First, we can turn to Liverpool Mayor. Liverpool was the first mover, so Liverpool Mayor Joe Anderson. He says this: our city is a diverse city and proud of our LGBTQ+ community and always will be. We cannot allow hatred and intolerance to go unchallenged by anyone, including by religious groups or sects. It's right that we have banned from the M&S Arena Franklin Graham, #love conquers hatred always. In other words, we're so diverse that we don't permit religious diversity or thought diversity. In other words, we're so tolerant that we are intolerant of mainstream Christianity. George Orwell frankly couldn't have put it any better. The Liverpool Arena also claimed that the event would have had a divisive impact on our city, which is also odd because every opinion, particularly opinions about ultimate issues and ultimate meaning, is divisive. And they were very happy to divide with their opinion. They just didn't like his opinion and the division that it would cause. So it had nothing to do with that. In Sheffield, Council Leader Julie Dawes said, all my life I have worked hard to fight discrimination, even if that requires discriminating, it seems. She says to make sure that we have an inclusive, tolerant and cohesive city that embraces diversity, etc., etc. Same old bilge. Inclusive, you mean exclusive. Tolerant, no, you mean intolerant, and so on. And what people forget in all of this is that, they say, oh yes, but he's been divisive and exclusive and intolerant. No, it's one thing to say things and to fight ideas with ideas. That's not discrimination. Discrimination is the act of saying you're not welcome here. We're going to ban you. We're going to shut you out. We're going to stop you. It's denying accommodation to someone. It's shutting someone out of a venue. It's killing off someone's job. It's substantive acts. That's discrimination. And people seem totally blind to this. Where they go, oh, well, we're fighting discrimination with discrimination. No, you're not. You're discriminating. This person is giving ideas, and the right answer is to fight ideas with ideas. But anyway, that's a slight aside. Just to say that these are the sorts of reasons which are employed right across the board. You've got Patrick Harvey, co-leader of the Scottish Greens Party, Glasgow City Council leader Sue Aitken, Assembly member for Newport West Jane Bryant, Newport City Council leader Jane Bryant. They're all here. I've got comments from them all spouting that same nonsensical nonsense. That is not what's really happening. These words cover the real issue. It's got nothing to do with diversity. Why? Because diversity of thought is not allowed. Ideas are not being fought with ideas at all. They're being fought with bans. It's got nothing to do with tolerance, except as a display of intolerance by actual discrimination, not merely expressing opinions. It has nothing to do with division. They're quite happy to divide with their opinions and actions. They're just not happy for him to divide with his opinions and actions. It's got nothing to do with inclusion and so on. I could go on. We know this. These are Orwellian terms that are what they claim not to be. It has everything to do with something very simple. It has everything to do with the fact that they hate the message itself. That's why I started by saying, what's he doing? He's going to speak a simple gospel message. That's what they're banning. And that's what they're fighting to ban. Yes, it's dressed up in all kinds of trendy excuses and modern terminology and politically correct language. I know that. But put that aside, put the theory aside and the PR spin aside and ask what's actually happening. What's actually happening is that this man will be prevented from standing up in front of thousands of people to declare to them that Jesus died under the penalty of their sins on the cross and seeks to save them. That's all. The end. That's what they're banning. Now, I was impressed, now that we've established that, I was actually impressed with Franklin Graham's initial response to all of this because he made a simple point. He clearly said that he was coming to the UK to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ, and the message that he will bring is a good message and it's needed by everyone, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or whatever attribute you want to pull out of the ether. It's not against any individual person, it's a message for all that all need. He told the truth and he absolutely stood by his convictions. Now, can I suggest that in this changing age, we need to do a lot more of that? For too long, there's been the option to instead pretend that we're fighting for freedom of speech, or that we're fighting for freedom of religion, or that we're appealing to some general principle of a pluralistic democratic society. To do these things that are easy outs and not to have to actually talk about what we really believe is good and needs to be said. Those excuses and those reasons simply won't cut it in a society that believes that what you're saying is evil. Freedom of speech, you see, only means something when you say it like that. When you get down into the brass tacks of the specific details, there's no agreement. You know, free speech to deny the Holocaust, for example. Many will say, yes, sure. Some will say no. Freedom of speech to spread reputation-destroying lies on the internet. Some defamation lawyers will say, well, of course not. Others will say we should. Freedom to deceive? Well, what about that? Freedom to verbalise hatred? Freedom to protest in a very inconvenient way that ruins people's days? Freedom for speech through pornography? Bring it down to its practical details and nobody agrees. Because what are we actually fighting for? We are fighting to say, you know what, that freedom of speech idea, it needs to include what we're saying because what we're saying is good. And this is one of those disagreements about what's good. That answer, free speech, to this world is totally unconvincing. And it makes us unconvincing. It's weak. One might well ask, do we actually believe in the value of what we're saying? That we need to resort to general principle arguments rather than fighting for the goodness of the message itself? Is it true or is it not? Is it the greatest need of the human race or is it not? Is it the message that God craves people to hear or isn't it? Does it carry the answer to every darkness and pain and grief and evil that the world has ever seen or not? If the answer is yes, 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 and yes, it's time we fought for it and showed that we know it to be true, to show the world that this is good and needs to be heard. It's time we fought not for freedom, but for truth. Paul says, pray for Christians to live in peace. Why? Because God desires all people everywhere to come to a knowledge of the truth. That's his goal. That's God's desire, that this truth would be free. I used to think, that this was a fight for freedom. I used to think that. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and all that kind of stuff. But I've since realised that's not really true. Primarily, more importantly, it's actually a fight 9 times in 10 for the truth. Because it's true beliefs, it's true statements of speech which tend to be ruthlessly censored and shut down and cancelled and stopped and attacked. It's not people who argue that gender is a social construct who get into strife. It's not people who argue for pansexuality that are banned and cancelled. It's not people who stoke conflict through rampant feminism against, men and all that kind of thing who get into trouble. It's not people who abuse and vilify and attack Christianity that are frowned upon. It's the truth that's frowned upon. And you know what? There's no clearer statement of that than banning Franklin Graham from coming and preaching the gospel. Oh yes, it's because of what he said about Trump. Oh yes, it's because... No, look at what they're actually doing. They're banning the gospel message. This is a fight for truth. And unless we have confidence in the truth, and we live and we speak as those who believe it with our whole heart, then we will remain in this great debate about what is good and true and what should be free. We will remain totally unconvincing. Hey, thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw, then make sure to hit the like button. If you want to never miss another video again, make sure to subscribe, or you can right now watch more videos right here. Cheers.